This week, the US government announced another round of increased export controls to China. What exactly contain these new export controls and how does this impact the business of ASML? And what does this say about the larger geopolitical fight between the US and China? In this podcast, I will deep dive into the implications of these new export controls, which might have far more bigger impact than all the previous ones together. It was a week full of turmoil for ASML. They published their Q3 results with declining growth forecast for 2024. Canon allegedly introduced a new machine that can compete with the ASML EUV machine. And, most importantly, new export controls were published. And these export controls will seriously impact ASML sales in China, which were 24% of their total sales, higher than ever. So, what do the new export controls exactly contain? The Bureau of Industry and Security, part of the Ministry of Trade, released a new 140 pages document which state that chip producers like Intel and Nvidia are not allowed to sell their most advanced chips to China anymore. Also, the definition of advanced technology is narrowed and is now smaller than the definition that the Netherlands applies. Furthermore, and this has enormous implication, the minimus rule, which states that the US government has authority over products that contain more than 25% American technology, is brought to 0% for ASML and two of their Japanese peers. What does this all mean? To start with the last one, it means that the Netherlands has lost its authority over a product that is made on their own soil. If an ASML machine contains one American screw, ASML needs to request a permit at the American government. ASML, Dutch politicians and analysts are bewildered over the extent of these new export controls. It really is a new step in the geopolitical war that the US is directly and unilaterally forcing authority over the exports of one of its closest allies, the Netherlands. I can imagine this might have broader implication of how allies of the US look to their big brother. If it happens to the Netherlands, can it happen to other countries as well? The Dutch Minister of Foreign Trade already replied, saying that every country decides about their own export controls. The minister might say this, but so far reality shows out different. It is clear that these unilateral decisions of the USA will have serious consequences for the relation with their allies. What does this mean economically? Because these kind of export controls have serious implications for ASML as a company. The Q3 results showed that 24% of all deliveries went to China, so further export controls are really going to have a serious impact on ASML. Despite the fact that they are still analyzing the actual implications, ASML already stated that it is definitely going to impact their results in the future. Even though they can still deliver these machines to other customers since demand is structurally higher than what they can produce. However, it does not seem likely that these export controls will decrease soon, let alone disappear. Following these new export controls, it's not unthinkable that ASML completely has to shut down exports to China in the coming years, which would be more in line with the decoupling of the world economy that I mentioned in one of my other podcasts. This will undoubtedly make the business case for ASML different in the short to medium term. And on a broader scale, these new export controls are actually reinforcing two trends that were already happening. The entire production of advanced technology was based on the world as a global village. This led to every part being produced in a country that could do it most efficiently, thereby lowering the price for chips. Please do read the extremely well-written Chip War of Chris Miller for a more elaborate analysis on this. Additionally, further decoupling of the chip production chain might cause inflationary pressures, which is not good for Western economies, which are still fighting inflation. In my podcast about the CEO of ASML being bullish on China, he mentioned that the more we push China away with export controls, the higher the rate of innovation will be for China to innovate their way out of these restrictions. Furthermore, this way it becomes more and more a tit-for-tat game between China and the US. The next step could be that China is further going to restrict the export of commodities needed for making the chips in the first place. But also other commodities needed for the energy transition could be prone to export controls. So to say, China also has its cards to play, and the fact that they haven't done it yet doesn't mean that they're not going to. To summarize, in this podcast I have analyzed the impact of the new export controls of advanced technology to China. Politically, these export controls are really different from the previous ones, since the US unilaterally took over the authority of a Dutch product produced on Dutch soil. It therefore directly questions the territorial integrity of the US towards its ally. Economically, these export controls are seriously going to harm the business case of ASML in the short to medium term, despite the fact that they still have more demand than they can fulfill. If this wasn't enough, Canon also released a statement in which they announce a new machine that might attack the monopoly ASML has with their EUV technology. Does this new machine also fall under the export controls? In my new podcast, I will analyze the impact of this competing machine of Canon and the implications for ASML and the broader chip market. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like this podcast.